Hello, welcome to part 4 of our tic-tac-toe video. So here we are using a Windows form application and trying to build the tic-tac-toe. So last time we had added some logic where you can click on the forms and it changes the image, and we are also maintaining a data structure. So we also wrote a function such that whatever is defined in this two-dimensional data structure that gets reflected in the board. And we are keeping the logic of the board separate from the user interface. This is called the separation of concern principle. Alright, so let's see where we left last time. So here we ask for the name of player, and here if we are clicking, we also added a check so that if the board is already occupied and some other user has played, you cannot click on that again. So we have only added this capability in 5 of the cells, and then you can add that later. Oh, look at that, chat wins. Alright. Oh, sorry, chat wins was there in the beginning. I was like, I didn't add that logic. How did that come up? Alright, now let's do one thing. What we are seeing here is we are pressing X and 0. But if I press X, the next move can only be a 0. So we need to add that logic in place. And again, because we have already separated out the UI from the logic, the only changes we need to do is in the logic. So this is the main function get updated board, which makes change to a state. And we have also added a check here, this if row is less than 0 or column is less than 0 and column is less than 0, it will return the board. So this is useful if we only want to get the status of the board without making any change. And this is where the change is being made. Now we need to figure out what changes to do and how do we toggle between those changes. Now do remember that tic-tac-toe only allows 2 players, right? So let's add another flag here, player, let's call it a boolean, and simply just call it is player 1 move, and we'll initialize this value of we can actually do this in the initialize board. That will make it more sense. So we'll say is player 1 move is equal to true. Alright, now we go down here and see if is player 1 move is equal to true. By the way, for boolean types you don't need to give this condition, you can also simply use this, because remember the if clause itself is a boolean statement. But just for clarity, let's just add this. If player 1 is equal to true, then now remember in a tic-tac-toe game we have specified that the player 1 move should always be a 0. So what we do is set the board to 0, else we will set it to X. And remember in the UI we have the logic that changes the picture based on X or O, which is looking like a 0 here, but that's actually an O. Let's go back. Now here's the thing, we have player 1 has moved, player 1 is equal to true, right? After this move is played, we need to toggle player 1 move. We have to set it to, if the player 1 move is equal to true, we have to set it to false. If player 1 move is false, we have to set it to true. So you can do an if then else condition to do it, but an easier way to do that is simply put not. Or we can do is player. Now this symbol here represents the not move, and since player 1 move is a boolean variable, which means it can only have true and false values, this flag or this operator here will simply reverse whatever the value player 1 move has. So if player 1 move was true, this will convert it to false. If player 1 move was false, it will convert it to true. So let's put a breakpoint and see how this works. So we go ahead. Alright, we are here. So we have already played the player one move. See, player one move was true because we have set this to true here. Now let's go to the next line. So after this line is executed, this should change to false. It's become false. And next time we play, we will resume, continue. See, it came a 0. Now if we press here, player move is false because last time we played it, we converted it to a false. After this is done, it will again move to true. So this will keep on toggling. So let's continue. So now it should place an X there. And if I click here again, let's just remove the breakpoint now. It will place a 0. Now if I try to click here, it's not going to allow it because we have already added logic for that. So as you can see, if you're adding generic logic, your program automatically expands and you don't need to add special conditions every time you make a change. So here there should be an X and there should be a 0. So our toggling logic is working very well. So we have had a basic game now, right? We can see if we click on the boards, it automatically toggles. Now obviously if I was first player, I'll click to make an O here, but remember we haven't added the logic here. So we leave it as is and just focus on these 5 boxes. So now how do you determine if the game has ended? So let's add another function in a class which says checkboard. And this will determine if the game has ended or not. So obviously the game ends if there's no we should actually return it a boolean value. So let's add a logic here. So sorry, I mean adding a comment here, and usually I recommend to use these 3 slashes to add the comment rather than 2 because Visual Studio automatically builds an XML way to add comments, and there's other software out there that can extract these comments and build a document automatically out of your code. But anyway, we haven't seen that, so let's not delve into much. This returns true if game has ended. So what is the easiest condition that the game has ended? One easy way to check if there is no more free space or there's no borders available to make a move. So we just execute a standard loop for each row and column. So here what we are doing is going through every cell and seeing if that is blank. But of course we are assigning the value here and we need to check if board row comma 1 is blank, then we simply return false, right? I mean there's no point going further, we know the game has not ended. So we can just add a checks if so here we are returning a false if we find any board that is available to play, and if every board is full then we return a true, which means the game has actually ended. Now obviously we are not going to reach this condition based on the form we have because we haven't added the logic in other cells. So what is another way where the game can end is if one of the player wins. So ideally this check here should be at the end. First you should now see if some player has won or not. So we'll copy this loop again. Let's add this loop. Move this back. Alright, so how do we check now if the game has actually ended or not? So let me paste that back. So now we are seeing we are going iterating through every row and column, and now how do we check if a game has ended? So let's go back and look at our tic-tac-toe board. So game ends when you have the same character, either O or X, in any of the columns or any of the rows or diagonally. So there are 3, 1, 2, 3 for the rows, 1, 2, 3 for the columns, and 2 diagonal. So there are 8 ways in which the game can end, and now we need to check for each one of those 8 ways. But it's pretty straightforward because we'll be doing it inside a loop. So if, let's check it, if what was the board name? Board I row, comma I column. Now we are first checking the rows. Or let's actually do the rows first. So if board I row, comma I column is equal to so here actually, if we run a loop, we'll have to take care of a little bit more things. So let's do this. Let's actually just hard code this and see if we can convert this to a loop later on. So I'm going to remove this code here for the I row and column, and then see if board I row, and let's give absolute numbers now. So we are checking so we are only specifying 2 conditions in each if statement. So what I'm going to do, add another one. If board 0, 1 is equal to board 0, 3, which means somebody has 1. Let me actually fix this. So let's see what we are doing here, right? We are saying if board 0, 1, actually so this should be 0, 0 because we are using a 0 based index. So we are saying if board 0, 0 is equal to 0, 1. So board 0, 0 is this, 0, 1 is this. So we are saying if this is equal to this, then do the second check, which is if this is equal to this, which means that somebody has 1. So now we are going to return the value true. So we are this is a check for only this is a check only for row 0. We are keeping the rows same. Check each row. Actually, this should be each check. Now let's do it for the second row. So second row means we are seeing if this, this, and this are the same. So we will do 1, 0. comma 1. Alright, now we have added this logic. Now we have to go back and call this function called checkboard. So we are in this function where we call draw board, and every time people make a move, anytime we click on this, we call the function draw board, and we say get updated board. So picture board only calls the update board function, so this is where all the action is happening. Now we should also do if checked what is the main board dot check board is equal to true, which means the game has ended. Just right now we'll simply issue a message box, game has ended. Giving the VB. If you do too much VB programming, you get confused with the message boxes. Alright, now let's run this. So remember, we have added some checks for this row and this row. So let's try this row first. So I'm going to play a 0 here. Oops, that is not correct. Why has the game ended? So we'll have to add a breakpoint. Let's do this here. I can actually see why the game ended. Passwords, let's go and check this. Because this condition will get satisfied as the board is empty. So we need to add a condition here. We need to make sure we are not comparing blanks when the board is empty. So only do this check when this is not blank. Let's add a if condition here. We actually didn't add a separate flag, even though it's not needed, as the next line is automatically added to the if. We still added that just for clarity. Now let's do the check for board 1, 0, same logic. Actually, I can just copy this whole thing here. That will make it a little bit easier. And in the next video, I'll show you how we'll convert this to a loop. Otherwise, this will be too many lines of code. Because we are comparing one. Alright, now let's see. So I click 0. Working perfectly fine. I'm going to make an X here. I'm going to do an 0 here, and I'm going to click an X here, and when I click a 0, game has ended because somebody has won. So the logic is in place. Now we haven't added the logic, the click logic for these cells here, so there's no use trying this move here. Now let's see if I move one of the X's here, in which case this condition should fail, because it will be a 0x0, so they are not in the same row. We don't have the same characters in the same row, so the game should continue and we should not get that message. Let's check that. 0x, and I'm going to do a 0 here and an X here. See, the game still continues, so our logic is working fine. Alright, I'm going to halt here, and in next part of this video we are going to see how we can put this function inside a loop, and then how we can add checks for the board state.